Hey there! Tonight, we're stepping into a different kind of story. Not the grand balls and glittering chandeliers you've seen in period dramas, but the narrow staircases, cold stone floors, and endless days that existed just out of sight. You won't find romance here, or at least not the kind anyone writes songs about. Just lives built on service, sacrifice, exhaustion, and the quiet dignity of surviving in a world that preferred you remain invisible. If these calm tales from the past help you drift into dreams, you can like and subscribe, but only if they truly calm your mind. And if you'd like to help our peaceful historical channel grow, your support means more than you imagine. Tell me in the comments where you're listening from, the time on your clock, and if you still have a little sleepy hype remaining, send it our way. It's oddly comforting to know who else is drifting off to the same slow march through history. So, dim the lights, let the gaslight flicker in your imagination. Settle in, and let's begin with the hidden world below stairs. Entering service, the beginning. You are young when service finds you. Perhaps 10 years old, maybe 12, sometimes younger. Your family is poor, or near enough to it that the thought of one less mouth to feed brings visible relief to your mother's face. You've had some schooling, just enough to read simple words and count coins, but not enough to dream of anything beyond survival. The village vicar or a local shopkeeper mentions a position. A big house needs a scullery maid, or a hall boy, or someone willing to work for room, board, and a few pounds a year. Your parents nod, you pack a small bundle, and just like that, childhood ends. There is no ceremony to mark this transition. No one asks if you're ready or if you understand what you're agreeing to. Readiness is irrelevant when hunger is the alternative. You walk, or ride in a cart if you're lucky, to a house larger than any building you've ever seen. Stone walls rise like cliffs. Windows stretch in endless rows. Gardens sprawl in directions you can't quite count. Somewhere inside are people who will never know your name, and others who will know it only to bark orders. The first day is disorientation wrapped in fear. You're shown to the servants' entrance, never the front door. That door is for people who matter. You matter only insofar as you can scrub, carry, polish, and disappear on command. An older servant, perhaps the housekeeper or butler, looks you over with the same expression one might give a horse at market. Are you strong enough? Will you break easily? Can you be trained? You're given a uniform, if the household is prosperous enough to provide one. A simple dress for girls, plain and dark. An apron, inevitably stained within hours. For boys, basic trousers and a shirt that never quite fits. You're told where to sleep. Usually in the attic, in a room shared with several others, or sometimes alone in a space so small you can touch both walls with your arms outstretched. The bed is a thin mattress on a wooden frame, stuffed with straw that crackles with every movement and smells of age and bodies. The rules are explained quickly, sometimes not at all. You learn by watching, by making mistakes, and by enduring the consequences. You wake before dawn. You work until long after dark. You speak only when necessary. You do not look the family in the eye. You do not complain. You do not slow down. You do not question. You certainly do not expect kindness, though occasionally, rarely, it appears in small moments that you'll remember for years. Your duties begin immediately. If you're a scullery maid, you're at the bottom of the ladder. You wash dishes, scrub pots, clean the kitchen floor on your hands and knees until your back screams and your knuckles bleed. You carry buckets of water from the pump, each one weighing what feels like half your body weight. You empty chamber pots, a task so foul you learn to breathe through your mouth and think of anything else. You black the kitchen range, a massive iron beast that devours coal and spits out soot that coats your face and hands. If you're a hall boy, you polish boots before dawn. You empty ashes from fireplaces. You carry messages between floors. You run errands to the village in all weather. You learn that cold rain soaking through your thin jacket is just another condition of existence, like hunger or exhaustion. You learn that your comfort is never a consideration. The other servants form a world within a world. Some are kind, offering a whispered word of encouragement or an extra slice of bread when the cook isn't looking. Others are cruel, finding in you a target for their own frustrations. The hierarchy among servants is as rigid as the one above stairs, perhaps more so, because their small powers are all they have. The housekeeper and butler reign like minor monarchs. The lady's maid and valet exist in a separate sphere, too elevated to acknowledge you. The footmen and housemaids occupy middle ground, and you, at the bottom, know your place. You make mistakes. Everyone does. You drop a plate and it shatters, the sound impossibly loud in the stone kitchen. You forget to refill the coal scuttle and someone important gets cold. You speak out of turn or fail to curtsy quickly enough when the mistress passes. The consequences vary. Sometimes a sharp word, sometimes a slap, sometimes a day without meals, sometimes threats that if you fail again, you'll be sent home in disgrace, and good luck finding another position after that. But you learn. The human body and mind are adaptable in ways you never imagined. You learn to wake at the first sound, to move silently, to work through pain and exhaustion. You learn which floorboards creak and how to avoid them. You learn the moods of the cook, the temperament of the housekeeper, the preferences of each family, even though you're not supposed to know such things. You learn to be invisible. You also learn about the family. Not directly. They would never speak to you about their lives. But you hear things. Conversations overheard while you're cleaning a grate in the corner, unnoticed. Arguments behind closed doors while you're in the hallway with a coal scuttle. Letters left on desks that you happen to glimpse while dusting. You know their secrets, their sorrows, their scandals. They know nothing of yours, and care less. At night, when you finally collapse into your narrow bed, your body is a catalogue of aches. Your feet throb. Your hands are raw. Your back feels permanently bent from bending, lifting, scrubbing. If you're lucky, you fall asleep before your mind can wander to the life you left behind. To the mother who hugged you goodbye but couldn't quite meet your eyes. To the siblings who now have more food because you're gone. to the future that seems to stretch endlessly in one direction only, downward into years of the same. But you also feel something else, something you don't quite have words for yet. Not pride exactly, more like a grim satisfaction that you're surviving, that you're earning your keep, contributing to something larger than yourself, even if that something will never acknowledge your contribution. You're part of the machinery that keeps this grand house running, and while no one will thank you, you know. And for now, that knowledge is enough. The first weeks blur into months. The seasons change, marked not by holidays or celebrations, but by shifts in your work. Winter means endless fires to tend, ashes to carry, cold that seeps through the thin walls of your attic room and makes sleep elusive. Spring means cleaning, the great annual purge when every room must be scrubbed, every carpet beaten, every window washed until your arms feel like they might fall off. Summer brings heat that turns the kitchen into a furnace and makes the heavy uniform cling to your skin. Autumn means preparing for winter again, the cycle eternal. You grow older in service, though you're still young by any reasonable measure. 13, 14, 15. Your body changes, but there's no time to think about such things. Your childhood friends are distant memories. Your family feels abstract, like characters in a story someone once told you. This is your life now, the house, the work, the routine. And while part of you sometimes stands at a window during a rare quiet moment and wonders what else might exist beyond these walls, mostly you're too tired to wonder. You simply endure. And in enduring, you become what they need you to be, a servant. The hierarchy below stairs. The world below stairs operates with rules as complex and unbending as any legal code. Every servant knows their place, their rank, their precise position in the invisible architecture that keeps the household functioning. To understand service is to understand this hierarchy, because your entire existence, from where you eat to where you sleep, to whom you may speak, is determined by your role. At the very top sits the butler, lord of the male servants and second only to the master himself in authority over household operations. The butler in a grand house is a figure of genuine power. He manages the wine cellar, a responsibility that requires knowledge, discretion, and the ability to detect when a bottle has been tampered with. He oversees the dining room, ensuring meals are served with military precision. He hires and fires the male staff, negotiates with tradesmen, and maintains the household accounts. His salary reflects his importance, anywhere from 40 to 60 pounds a year, a fortune compared to what you earn. He dresses well, speaks with authority, and carries himself with the bearing of a man who knows his worth. He answers directly to the master, and his word is law among the servants. The housekeeper stands as his female equivalent, though in practice their domains rarely overlap. She's addressed as Mrs., regardless of whether she's ever married, the title conveying respect and authority. She controls the female staff with absolute power, determining their schedules, approving their conduct, and maintaining discipline. She manages household supplies, keeps meticulous accounts in ledger books that she reviews with the mistress weekly, and oversees the maintenance of furniture, linens, and all household goods. She holds the keys to storerooms and linen closets, literal symbols of her authority that hang from her belt and jingle when she walks. Her salary matches the butler's, sometimes exceeds it in houses where the lady of the house takes particular interest in domestic management. She occupies a private sitting room, a rare luxury that sets her apart from nearly everyone else below stairs. Below these two pillars of authority exists a carefully calibrated system of ranks. The valet serves the master directly, managing his wardrobe, helping him dress, shaving him each morning, polishing his boots, and accompanying him on travels. The valet occupies an odd position, close to power, but not quite powerful himself. He knows the master's habits intimately, might hear confidential conversations, and sometimes receives cast-off clothing that elevates his appearance above his station. He answers to the butler, but serves the master, a delicate balance requiring tact. The lady's maid holds equivalent status on the female side, attending to the mistress with similar intimacy. She arranges hair, fastens dresses with their 100 small buttons and hooks, mends delicate fabrics, and maintains the vast wardrobe of gowns, undergarments, shoes, and accessories that wealthy women require. She's expected to have skills beyond basic service, including needlework so fine it's nearly invisible, knowledge of current fashions, and the ability to maintain absolute discretion about everything she sees and hears. She, too, benefits from hand-me-downs, receiving gowns that the mistress considers outdated, but which would cost a year of a lower servant's wages. Like the valet, she occupies a strange middle ground, neither quite servant nor quite equal to the family, trusted, yet forever apart. The cook reigns over the kitchen with territorial ferocity. In grand houses, this might be a chef, possibly French, paid handsomely for the prestige their name brings. In more modest establishments, it's usually a woman who has worked her way up through years of kitchen service. The cook determines menus, manages kitchen staff, and produces the elaborate meals that mark a household's status. Multiple courses, each requiring precise timing and presentation. Soups, fish, roasts, game, vegetables, puddings, savories. The cook's domain is the heat and chaos of the kitchen, and within that space, she rules absolutely. Undercooks and kitchen maids move at her direction, and heaven help the scullery maid who fails to have a pot scrubbed when it's needed. Footmen occupy the visible tier of male service. Tall men are preferred, their height considered decorative, and they're often matched in pairs for symmetry. First footman, second footman, third if the household is large enough. They serve at table, standing behind chairs, presenting dishes, pouring wine, all done with choreographed precision. They answer the door, accompany the family on outings, carry parcels, move furniture, and perform whatever tasks require male strength or a presentable appearance. They wear livery, often elaborate, that marks them as belonging to this particular household. It's a position with prospects. A footman might advance to butler, and so they tend to maintain standards, aware that they're being evaluated. Housemaids form the bulk of female servants and exist in their own hierarchy. The head housemaid supervises the others and handles the most important rooms. Second, third, fourth housemaids follow, each with designated responsibilities. They clean bedrooms, make beds with military corners, empty chamber pots with faces carefully neutral, dust furniture, polish brass and silver, sweep floors, beat carpets, wash windows, tend fires in winter, and maintain an impossible standard of cleanliness throughout the house. Their work is endless and largely invisible. A well-cleaned room looks as if it's always been perfect, erasing evidence of their labor. Chambermaids specialize in bedrooms, entering silently in the early morning to light fires and open curtains before the family wakes. Parlor maids tend to reception rooms, maintaining the spaces where guests are received and status is displayed. Between maids, sometimes called tweenies, occupy an unfortunate position, considered too experienced for the lowest tasks, but not skilled enough for higher ones. They assist whoever needs help, belonging fully to no department, often working the hardest for the least recognition. The kitchen maid ranks above only the scullery maid in the kitchen hierarchy. She assists the cook, prepares vegetables, makes sauces, tends to simple dishes, and learns the craft that might one day elevate her. The scullery maid, bottom of the entire system, performs the dirtiest work. She scrubs pots, washes dishes, cleans floors, empties slops, blacks the range, and does whatever menial task no one else wants. She works in the darkest, hottest part of the kitchen, often starting at 5:30 in the morning to heat water for the household's needs. Her hands are permanently reddened and rough. Her back aches from constant bending. Her wages are barely enough to call wages, maybe 10 to 13 pounds a year, and she knows that every other servant in the house outranks her. The hierarchy also creates divisions that feel insurmountable. Upper servants often disdain lower ones, maintaining social distance even though they're all servants. The lady's maid would never dream of socializing with a scullery maid. The butler maintains formality with footmen. This mirrors the class distinctions of the wider world, compressed and concentrated below stairs. Everyone knows their place. Everyone maintains it. And everyone, from butler to scullery maid, ultimately exists to serve the invisible gods above stairs, the family who rarely thinks about the machinery that powers their comfort. You learn this hierarchy not through explanation, but through experience. Through being corrected when you speak to someone above your rank without proper deference. Through watching who enters rooms first, who gets served first at meals, whose orders take precedence. Through understanding that your position at the bottom means you have value only in your labor, that you're interchangeable and replaceable, that the system will continue without you, but cannot continue without those above you. It's a lesson that shapes how you move through the world, head down, voice quiet, presence minimal. You are part of something larger, but you are the smallest part, and you never forget it. A day in the life, the endless hours. The day begins in darkness, always darkness. It's 5:30 in the morning, sometimes earlier, and your small attic room is still cold with night. Summer or winter makes little difference. You're always cold at this hour. There's no gentle waking, no gradual transition from sleep to consciousness. Just the internal clock you've developed through months or years of this routine, pulling you from dreams into the relentless reality of another day. You dress quickly. your fingers fumbling with buttons in the dim light of a single candle. The uniform is the same as yesterday, the same as every day. Simple, dark, practical. No adornment. No personality. You splash cold water on your face from a chipped basin, shocking your senses awake. There's no mirror, or if there is, you barely glance at it. What you look like doesn't matter. Only what you do matters. If you're the scullery maid, you're first to the kitchen. Your primary task is lighting the range, that massive iron beast that dominates one wall and consumes coal like a living thing. You clear yesterday's ashes, careful not to raise too much dust, though your face will be black with soot within minutes anyway. You lay new coal, kindle the fire, work the bellows until flames catch and spread. The kitchen must be warm before the cook arrives. The water must be hot before the household wakes. This is your responsibility, and failure is not an option. You fill kettles from the pump outside, carrying them back through the cold morning air. Each one weighs heavy on your arms. You make trip after trip because the household needs water constantly. For tea, for cooking, for washing, for baths later in the day. The pump handle is cold enough to hurt your hands, but you work it steadily, watching water gush into bucket after bucket. Your shoulders ache before the sun even considers rising. If you're a hall boy, you're polishing boots. Every pair in the household must be cleaned and made presentable before anyone wakes. You sit in a small room or corridor with tins of black polish, brushes, and cloths, working methodically through each boot and shoe. Master's riding boots, mistress's walking shoes, the children's small boots, guest shoes if anyone is visiting. Each must be brushed, polished, buffed to a shine. Your hands are permanently stained black under the nails. The smell of boot polish becomes so familiar you stop noticing it. You also empty chamber pots, a task approached with grim determination and a deliberate emptying of the mind. You collect them from bedrooms before the family wakes, careful not to spill, carrying them to the outside privy or the slop sink. You rinse them with hot water, dry them, and return them, all before anyone in the family opens their eyes. They will never know you did this. They will never think of who did this. It simply happens, like magic. Except magic doesn't leave your hands smelling foul, even after washing 3 times. By 6 in the morning, the kitchen is warming, and the cook arrives, usually in a mood determined by how much sleep she got and how ambitious the day's menu is. Kitchen maids follow, then the scullery maid's real work begins. The cook needs pots, pans, knives, chopping boards, mixing bowls. Everything must be cleaned and ready. As cooking begins, so does the endless cycle of washing. Pots used for sauces, pans used for frying, bowls used for mixing. The sink is never empty. Your hands are never dry. Hot water, lye soap that strips the skin from your hands, scrubbing until every surface shines. Then more pots, more pans, an endless assembly line of dirty things that must become clean. Upstairs, the housemaids begin their rounds. They move through the house like ghosts, opening curtains in rooms the family occupies, lighting fires in grates before anyone comes down. They carry coal scuttles that strain their backs and arms. They sweep hearths, trying not to raise dust. They dust furniture with soft cloths, touching expensive objects they could never afford, careful not to break anything because breakage comes out of wages. The chambermaids enter bedrooms with kettles of hot water, pouring them into wash basins. They empty chamber pots if the hallboy hasn't reached them yet. They make beds with tight corners and smooth surfaces. They open windows for air, then close them again when the room reaches the right temperature. They lay out clothing if the lady's maid hasn't already. They adjust curtains to the exact position the mistress prefers. They do all of this silently, invisibly, and quickly, because lingering in bedrooms while the family is present makes them uncomfortable. By 7 or 8, the family wakes and requires attention. The lady's maid attends the mistress, helping her dress in layers of undergarments and petticoats, and the main dress with its 100 fastenings. She arranges hair, which might take an hour or more depending on the style. She selects jewelry. She ensures every detail is perfect because the mistress's appearance reflects on her directly. The valet performs similar duties for the master, laying out clothes, assisting with dressing, and ensuring he's presentable for breakfast. Breakfast below stairs happens in shifts, determined by rank. The upper servants eat first, served by the lower servants. The lower servants eat after, whatever's left, usually bread and tea, sometimes porridge, rarely anything substantial. You eat quickly, because there's no time to linger. You eat standing sometimes, or perched on a stool in the kitchen, because sitting down implies leisure, and leisure is not part of the schedule. The family breakfasts upstairs, a meal that requires footmen to serve, housemaids to ensure the dining room is perfect, and the cook to prepare multiple dishes, even if most will barely be touched. Eggs, bacon, kippers, toast, preserves, tea, coffee. The footmen stand against the wall, waiting to refill cups or remove plates, standing so still they might be mistaken for furniture, except furniture doesn't get tired. After breakfast, the real work begins. Housemaids clean bedrooms one by one, make beds, dust every surface. Sweep or vacuum floors if the household is modern enough to have a vacuum, though operating one is harder than sweeping. Empty and clean wash basins. Refill water pitchers. Check chamber pots again. Tidy any disorder. Polish brass fixtures. Wash windows if they need it, which they always do. The goal is to make each room look untouched, pristine, as if no one has ever lived in it. You clean the grates next, a job so dirty you tie a cloth over your hair and accept that you'll be covered in ash. You remove yesterday's ashes, scrub the grate with blacking, polish the surround until it gleams. You lay new fires, arranged precisely so they'll light easily later. You carry coal scuttles up multiple flights of stairs, your legs burning with the effort. Every bedroom, every reception room, every space that might be used requires a fire laid and ready. The kitchen never stops. The cook is preparing lunch, which the family calls luncheon, and which requires multiple courses, even if it's just the family. Soup, fish, meat. Lunch for the family happens around 1 or 2. Lunch for the servants happens at midday, again in shifts. The servants' meal is simpler, usually a roast or boiled meat with vegetables, followed by something sweet if you're lucky. You eat quickly, then back to work. There's no rest after meals. Rest is for the family. You return to your tasks, whatever they might be. More cleaning, more washing, more carrying things up and down stairs until your legs feel like they might give out. Afternoons are when you tackle the major tasks of the day. Deep cleaning a particular room. Doing laundry if that's your role, which means hauling wet sheets and clothing to the drying area, then pressing everything with heavy irons heated on the stove. Polishing silver, a job that requires attention and patience, working paste into every crevice, then buffing until it shines. Mending linens, sitting in dim light with needle and thread, making tiny stitches that no one will ever notice, but which keep the household running. Footmen might be called to move furniture, run errands to the village, attend to guests if anyone visits. Housemaids might be tasked with special projects, cleaning a room that's been closed up, preparing a guest room on short notice, assisting with whatever crisis has emerged. The valet might be preparing the master's evening clothes or accompanying him somewhere. The lady's maid might be mending a torn hem or sourcing a particular ribbon the mistress wants. Everyone is always busy, always needed somewhere, always behind on something. Around 4 or 5, servants get a brief break, maybe a cup of tea, a slice of bread. 15 or 20 minutes to sit down, though often you're too tired to enjoy it. Your feet hurt, your hands hurt, everything hurts. But you drink the tea and eat the bread, because you need the energy for what comes next. Dinner for the family is the major production of the day. Multiple courses, formal service, everything perfect. The cook has been preparing for hours. The kitchen is at peak chaos. Dishes must be perfectly timed, going out in sequence, each course replacing the last with military precision. Footmen serve, presenting dishes from the left, removing from the right, pouring wine, standing at attention. Kitchen maids hand up plates. The scullery maid washes dishes as fast as she can, trying to keep up. The dining room must be perfect. Candles lit at the right moment. The table arranged with precision. Flowers fresh. Silver gleaming. Linens spotless. Any imperfection reflects poorly on the household, and thus on the servants who maintain it. The family eats for hours sometimes, talking and laughing and enjoying themselves, while below stairs you work through the organized chaos of keeping them comfortable. The servants' dinner happens after the family is served, usually around 8 or 9 at night. It's a more substantial meal than lunch, the main meal of the day for servants. You're desperately hungry by now, having worked for 14 or 15 hours on minimal food. You eat everything on your plate, grateful for the hot food, the chance to sit, the brief respite. But you're not done. The evening work remains. Cleaning up from dinner, which means washing dishes until your hands are numb. Tidying the kitchen until it's ready for tomorrow. Taking hot water to bedrooms for the family's evening ablutions. Turning down beds, a process that involves removing decorative covers, turning back sheets, fluffing pillows, ensuring everything is ready for sleep. Attending to the family's evening needs, helping them undress if you're a lady's maid or valet, banking fires for the night, checking that all is secure. You might not finish until 10 or 10:30 at night, sometimes later if the family entertains or returns late from an outing. 17 hours of work, sometimes more. Your body is beyond tired. You're operating on something past exhaustion, a state where you move automatically, no longer thinking, just doing, because doing is all there is. You climb the stairs to your attic room, each step an effort. You undress in darkness, too tired even to light a candle. You fall into bed on the straw mattress, and before you can even think about the day, sleep takes you. A heavy, dreamless sleep that lasts only until 5:30 the next morning, when it all begins again. The endless hours, the relentless labor, the same tasks repeated day after day after day. This is the rhythm of service. This is your life. Living conditions, rooms, food, and privacy. Your room is not a room in the way the family upstairs would understand the word. It's a space, barely, carved out of the attic or tucked into some forgotten corner of the house where no one of importance would ever venture. If you're lucky, it's your own. More often, it's shared with one or more other servants, your beds mere feet apart, your few possessions stored in a single shared drawer or wooden chest. The ceiling slopes if you're in the attic, which most lower servants are. You learn quickly to duck in certain spots after hitting your head a few times on the beams. The walls are plain, unplastered sometimes, showing the bare bones of the house's construction. There's no wallpaper, no decoration, nothing to soften the hard reality of stone and wood. In winter, the cold is so brutal you can see your breath in the morning. In summer, the heat becomes oppressive, trapped under the roof with nowhere to go. You sweat through your sleep and wake feeling worse than when you laid down. Your furniture is minimal, a narrow bed, its mattress stuffed with straw that compresses over time until you're essentially sleeping on boards. A thin blanket that's never quite enough. Maybe a pillow, though not always. A chair if you're fortunate, though you rarely have time to sit in it. A small dresser or a wooden chest for your belongings, which aren't many. Your uniform, a spare if you have one. Undergarments, perhaps a Sunday dress if you own one. A Bible if you're religious or were given one. A letter from home if your family can write. That's it. Everything you own fits in a space the size of a bread box. There's a small window usually, though it might be so grimy you can barely see through it. You don't clean your own window. There's no time, and besides, what does it matter? The view is rooftops, or maybe a glimpse of sky. Nothing that concerns you. Light comes from a single candle that you must supply yourself out of your wages, though sometimes the household provides candle stubs that are no longer good enough for the family's use. You use them sparingly because they cost money and you barely have any. Privacy is a foreign concept. If you share a room, you undress and dress in front of others, too tired to feel modest. You sleep within earshot of their snoring, their coughing, their occasional crying when they think you're asleep. If you have your own room, it's so small there's barely space to turn around, and the walls are thin enough that you hear everything from adjacent rooms. Conversations, arguments, intimate sounds. You pretend not to hear, just as others pretend not to hear you. There's no running water in the servants' quarters. You wash from a basin with cold water carried from downstairs. In winter, there might be a thin layer of ice on the water in the morning. You break it, splash your face, and suppress the gasp because you're not allowed to disturb others, even though they're disturbing you simply by existing in the same exhausted state. Baths are rare, maybe once a week if the household allows it, taken in a tin tub with water that's been used by others first. The family bathes in porcelain luxury upstairs. You bathe in practicality below. The privy is outside or in a distant corner of the basement, reached by navigating dark corridors. Going to it in the middle of the night is an ordeal involving getting dressed enough to be decent, finding your way in darkness, and hoping you don't encounter anyone else on the same mission. Chamber pots exist in servants' quarters too, but they must be emptied by whoever uses them, adding one more task to the endless list. Food is provided, but the quality depends on your rank and the generosity of the household. Upper servants eat better, sometimes eating the family's leftovers, which are far superior to what's prepared specifically for servants. Lower servants eat simple, repetitive meals. Breakfast is usually bread and tea, sometimes porridge if you're lucky. Lunch is bread and cheese, maybe cold meat if there's enough. Dinner, the main meal, is typically a roast or boiled meat with potatoes and vegetables. The meat is often the cheaper cuts, tough and requiring thorough chewing. The vegetables are whatever's in season and plentiful. The servants' hall, where meals are eaten, is a utilitarian space. Long tables, benches, plain dishes. You sit according to rank, the hierarchy's maintained even here. The butler and housekeeper might eat separately in the housekeeper's room, a privilege of their positions. The upper servants sit at the head of the table and are served first. The lower servants sit at the far end and get what's left. You learn not to take too much, even if you're hungry, because taking more than your share violates the unspoken rules. The food is filling but monotonous. Bread appears at every meal. Potatoes are a staple. Meat, when it's provided, is prepared simply, usually boiled or roasted without much seasoning. There's no wine for servants, only tea or water, sometimes beer depending on the household. Tea is consumed in quantities that would shock outsiders, the hot liquid providing comfort and energy in equal measure. You drink it strong and dark, often without milk, because milk is precious. Desserts are rare for servants. The family gets elaborate puddings, cakes, pastries. The servants might get bread pudding or treacle tart on special occasions, but often there's nothing sweet to end the meal. Sugar is controlled, rationed, kept in locked cupboards. The cook has access. The housekeeper has access. You do not. Stealing food, even a spare apple or a piece of bread, is a serious offense that can result in immediate dismissal. You eat what's provided, when it's provided, in the portions allotted. The quality of life varies dramatically by household. A kind employer might ensure the servants' quarters are at least adequate, the food sufficient, the working conditions bearable. A cruel or indifferent employer provides the bare minimum, viewing servants as necessary nuisances to be managed at the lowest possible cost. You have no control over which type you serve. You take the position available and hope for the best. Some households are worse than others. You hear stories from servants who come and go. A house where the cook is a tyrant who beats the kitchen maids. A place where the butler takes liberties with the young housemaids and the family looks the other way. A household where the servants are fed on scraps not good enough for dogs. A grand estate where so many servants work that you can disappear into the mass and occasionally rest without being noticed. An urban townhouse with too few servants and too much work, everyone stretched beyond endurance. Your possessions beyond clothes are almost non-existent. You might have a hairbrush, though often shared with roommates. A comb, a scrap of soap, a handkerchief. If you're literate and have the energy, maybe a book borrowed from somewhere, read by candlelight in precious stolen moments. If you're religious, a rosary or a prayer book. A letter from home, read and reread until you've memorized every word. A small token, a pebble or ribbon that reminds you of something before service, though the memories grow hazier with each passing year. You have no space that's truly yours. Your room isn't yours. It belongs to the household, and you occupy it at their pleasure. You can be moved to a different room on a whim if someone of higher rank needs your space. Your belongings can be searched at any time. Your privacy is not a right, but a privilege that can be revoked without explanation. You exist in the household's shadow, housed and fed, but never quite secure, never quite settled, always aware that this place is not your home and never will be. Yet you adapt. Humans are remarkably adaptable. You learn to find comfort in small things. The warmth of the bed after a freezing day. The taste of tea after hours of work. The quiet moment at the window watching dawn break. The camaraderie of other servants who understand without speaking. The knowledge that tonight you'll sleep under a roof, and tomorrow you'll eat, which is more than many have. You lower your expectations until they match your reality, and in that lowering you find a kind of peace. Not happiness, not satisfaction, but something like acceptance. And for now, that's enough. The rules and restrictions. You learn the rules before you learn anything else. Not written down, not explained in detail, but absorbed through observation, correction, and the occasional sharp rebuke. Service operates on rules so numerous and specific that violating them, even unknowingly, marks you as incompetent or worse. And in a world where your employment is your survival, incompetence is unaffordable. The first rule, unspoken but absolute, is invisibility. You must be present when needed and absent when not. This sounds simple until you attempt to practice it. You're cleaning a room when the family enters. Do you continue working? Do you leave? The answer depends on factors you're still learning to read. The family member's mood, the time of day, the nature of your task. Generally, you try to finish quickly and exit, but if you're in the middle of something that can't be abandoned, you make yourself as small as possible. Back to the wall, eyes down, hands still. You become furniture. You never speak to the family unless spoken to. This is absolute. No matter how urgent your message, how important your information, you wait. If the lady of the house walks past you in the corridor, you curtsy and remain silent. If the master needs something, he'll ring or summon you. You don't volunteer information. You don't offer opinions. You don't make conversation. Your voice exists to respond, not to initiate. You avert your eyes. Looking directly at the family, particularly making eye contact, is considered forward and disrespectful. You look at the floor, at the wall, at your hands. You see them in your peripheral vision, enough to anticipate needs, but not enough to make them uncomfortable with your gaze. They want service, not connection. Your eyes looking into theirs suggests equality, and equality is not part of this relationship. You exit rooms walking backwards if you've been attending to the family directly. Turning your back is considered rude. So you bow or curtsy, then step backwards carefully, hoping you don't trip over furniture or your own feet. You've seen servants stumble during this, and the family's laughter at such incidents is never kind. You practice until backward walking becomes natural, until you can navigate rooms in reverse without hesitation. You're never to be heard. No loud footsteps, no heavy breathing. Even when you've just carried coal scuttles up 4 flights of stairs and your lungs are burning. No singing, even though you used to sing at home and it made the work bearable. No humming, no whistling. Silence or near silence is expected. The family shouldn't be reminded that servants exist unless they actively need one. Sound marks your presence, and your presence is meant to be ghostly. You don't eat where the family eats, or even where they might see you eating. The servants' hall is your dining space, separate and distinct. You don't drink from the family's glasses or use their plates. You don't sit in their chairs. These rules seem obvious, but they extend into subtleties. You don't touch family possessions unnecessarily. You clean them, yes, but with detachment. You don't admire them. You don't covet them. Or at least you don't show that you do. Your days off are few and conditional. Initially, there are no scheduled days off. You work every day, every week, every month. Around the 1880s, servants begin receiving a half day on Sunday, starting after lunch and lasting until evening. This assumes your morning work is completed satisfactorily. If the mistress is displeased with something, your afternoon off can be revoked without explanation. Once a month, you might get a full day off, again, depending on good behavior and completed tasks. This day off is precious beyond measure, though you're often too exhausted to do anything but sleep or sit quietly somewhere. Going out requires permission. You can't simply leave the house, even on your day off, without informing someone in authority. The butler or housekeeper needs to know where you're going, when you'll return, and approve of your plans. Going to church is always approved. Visiting family is usually acceptable. But going to a public house or theater might be forbidden, considered morally suspect. Your personal life is not entirely your own. Followers, the Victorian term for romantic interests, are strictly controlled. You're generally not allowed to receive visitors, male or female, at the house. Certainly no male visitors for female servants. The household fears for its reputation and worries about scandal. If you're courting someone, you do it on your rare time off, away from the house, and you don't discuss it openly. Getting pregnant while in service is grounds for immediate dismissal, no matter the circumstances. The family won't harbor a servant who brings scandal to the household. You must be clean and presentable within the limits of your uniform. Your uniform itself must be spotless, though you're washing and mending it yourself on your limited free time. Your hands should be clean, though that's nearly impossible when your work involves coal, ashes, and soap that strip skin. Your hair must be neat, pinned back severely, hidden under a cap. No loose curls or fashionable styles. Nothing that suggests vanity or individuality. Alcohol is forbidden to lower servants. The upper servants, particularly the butler, have access because managing wine is part of their duties. But lower servants are expected to abstain completely. Even on your day off, being seen drunk or even mildly intoxicated can cost you your position. The temperance movement is strong, and households often pride themselves on moral rectitude, which extends to controlling servants' behavior even outside the house. Theft, even of trivial items, is absolutely forbidden and severely punished. Taking a candle stub, pocketing a leftover pastry, borrowing a ribbon without asking, all are considered theft. Discovery means dismissal without references, which effectively ends your ability to work in service anywhere. References are crucial. Without them, you're unemployable. So even when you're desperately hungry or in need of something small, you don't take what isn't explicitly given. You don't gossip about the family. What you see, what you hear, what you learn about their private lives must remain private. This is perhaps the most violated rule, because servants are human and humans talk. But officially, it's forbidden. You certainly don't gossip with outsiders. If you're caught sharing family business with someone outside the household, you'll be sacked immediately. Discretion is valued almost as highly as competence. Your room is subject to search at any time. The housekeeper or butler can enter and inspect your belongings without warning or explanation. This isn't about trust, it's about control. They're ensuring you haven't stolen anything, haven't hidden anything forbidden, haven't brought disgrace on the household through possessing something inappropriate. You have no recourse if you feel this violates your privacy. Privacy is not a right you possess. You attend church. This isn't optional. Sunday morning, before your half-day begins, you're expected to attend service. The household staff might attend together, filling several pews, a visible demonstration of the family's piety by extension. You wear your best clothes, which still mark you clearly as servants. You listen to sermons about duty, humility, and accepting your station in life. The church reinforces the social order that puts you at the bottom, and you're expected to internalize this as divinely ordained. You don't argue with your superiors, whether they're the butler, housekeeper, or the family themselves. If you're told to do something, you do it. If you're criticized, you accept it. Talking back, even defending yourself against false accusations, is insubordination. You might try to explain later, carefully, respectfully, but in the moment, you comply and apologize. Illness is not an excuse for shirking duties. Unless you're physically unable to stand, you're expected to work. A cold, a headache, monthly pains for women, none of these are sufficient reason to remain in bed. You work through illness, and if you're genuinely too sick to work, you'd better hope it's brief, because extended illness might result in dismissal. The household can't afford to pay servants who aren't working, and they certainly can't afford to provide extended medical care. Your letters, if you're literate enough to send and receive them, can be monitored. Not all households do this, but some do, particularly with young servants. The butler or housekeeper might review your correspondence to ensure you're not sharing household secrets or planning to leave suddenly. It's another invasion you simply accept. These rules, and dozens more, form the cage you live within. They're not designed to be cruel, exactly, though they often feel that way. They're designed to maintain order, to keep the household running smoothly, to preserve the social hierarchy. You are the lowest tier of that hierarchy, and the rules ensure you remember it. Some servants internalize these rules so completely they become second nature. Others chafe against them constantly, but comply because the alternative is starvation. You fall somewhere in between, following the rules because you must, while quietly maintaining a part of yourself that remembers you're human, not just a function. That small part, kept private and protected, is what lets you survive. Relationships and romance below stairs. Loneliness is a constant companion in service, even when you're surrounded by people. You work alongside other servants, eat with them, sleep near them, but genuine connection is complicated by the rigid hierarchy, by exhaustion, and by the knowledge that anyone might report you for a violation. Yet humans need connection, and so relationships form in the narrow spaces allowed. Friendships and romances blooming in the cracks of a system designed to prevent them. Friendships among servants are carefully calibrated. You bond most naturally with those of similar rank. Scullery maids with kitchen maids, housemaids with other housemaids, footmen with footmen. These are your true companions, the ones who understand the specific hardships of your role. You share glances during particularly difficult moments. You cover for each other when someone is sick or slow. You exchange whispered jokes during the few minutes of break time. You pass along advice about how to manage particular tasks or avoid the displeasure of the cook or butler. But these friendships have limits. You're competing for the same limited advancement opportunities. If the head housemaid position opens, you and your friend both need it, and only one will get it. You might share a room with another servant and still not truly know her, because you're both too tired to talk, and private thoughts shared in darkness might be used against you later. Trust is valuable, but also dangerous. Upper servants and lower servants rarely form close friendships. The lady's maid doesn't confide in the scullery maid. The butler maintains professional distance from the hall boy. These divisions mirror the class structure above stairs, and crossing them is seen as inappropriate. The upper servants often view lower servants with mild disdain, having worked hard to rise above that station and not eager to be reminded of it. The lower servants often resent the upper servants, seeing them as pretentious and having forgotten their origins. The household is less a community than a collection of stratified groups, each existing in its own social layer. Romance is more complicated still. The household officially discourages it, fears scandal, fears pregnancy, fears anything that disrupts the smooth operation of service. But young people thrown together in close quarters will inevitably feel attraction, and so romances develop despite the prohibitions. A housemaid and a footman exchange glances across the servants' hall. A kitchen maid and a groom meet in the yard during brief moments outside. A lady's maid receives attention from the valet. These relationships must be conducted in absolute secrecy. There are no formal courtship rituals in service, no taking walks together in public, no attending dances as a couple, no meeting each other's families. Instead, romance happens in stolen moments. A conversation during the brief afternoon break, a note passed through an intermediary, a midnight meeting in the hallway, risky and thrilling, where you speak in whispers and listen constantly for footsteps. You might not even be able to hold hands without fear of discovery. Some servants court people outside the household. On your rare day off, you might meet someone from another household, a shopkeeper's assistant, a factory worker, someone from your village if it's near enough to visit. These relationships have their own challenges. You see each other so rarely that maintaining connection is difficult. Letters help if both of you can read and write, but letters cost money to post and can be monitored. You might go months between meetings, and in that time, feelings can fade or find other directions. Marriage is the goal of most romantic relationships, but marriage means leaving service. Married servants are rarely kept on, the assumption being that a married woman will become pregnant and unable to work, or that a married couple will require accommodations the household can't or won't provide. So marriage is simultaneously desired and dreaded. It offers escape from service, but throws you into economic uncertainty. Without the guaranteed food and lodging of service, you'll need a spouse who earns enough to support both of you. That's not always available. Some servants do marry each other. The butler marries the housekeeper, both old enough and established enough that they can negotiate positions together. A footman and housemaid might wed after years of secret courtship, then seek positions in different households, writing to each other and seeing each other rarely. Some manage to find work as a married couple, the husband as a gardener or groom, the wife as a laundress, living in a small cottage on the estate. But these arrangements are rare. Pregnancy out of wedlock is catastrophic. A female servant who becomes pregnant is immediately dismissed. No exceptions, no sympathy. It doesn't matter if she was coerced, if she was promised marriage, if the father was another servant, or even a member of the family. She's the one who pays the price. Dismissed without references, she faces a bleak future. She might return to her family in shame, if they'll have her. She might end up in a workhouse. She might become a prostitute simply to survive. Victorian society is unforgiving of women in this situation, and service offers no protection. Male servants who father children face fewer consequences. They might be dismissed if the household is particularly strict, but more often they're simply warned and the incident is forgotten. The double standard is blatant and absolute. If the woman was another servant, she's gone, and he remains. If the woman was someone outside the household, it's barely acknowledged. The unfairness is noted by female servants, but there's nothing to be done about it. Some servants remain unmarried by choice or circumstance. The upper servants, particularly housekeepers and butlers, often never marry. They've risen to positions of relative comfort and authority, and marriage would mean giving that up. They might form discreet relationships with each other, practical arrangements without the legal complications of marriage. But often they simply remain single, their lives absorbed entirely by the household they serve. For lower servants, remaining unmarried is more often circumstance than choice. You're too young, too poor, too tired to court effectively. Years pass in the blur of work. Suddenly you're 30, then 40, and the opportunity has passed. You might never have felt romantic love, never had the chance to develop a relationship beyond brief moments. Service has consumed the years when most people marry and start families. You'll accept this, more or less, though sometimes at night the loneliness is overwhelming. There are, of course, inappropriate relationships. The master or his sons taking liberties with housemaids. The butler or valet forcing attentions on younger female servants. These situations are rarely acknowledged and never punished correctly. If a housemaid complains that a family member touched her inappropriately, she's the one dismissed, blamed for tempting him or making trouble. The man faces no consequences. The power imbalance is so vast that resisting is almost impossible, and the results of giving in or being forced fall entirely on the woman. Despite all this, genuine affection exists in service. You see it in the way a long-married butler and housekeeper work together, communicating in glances after decades of partnership. You see it in young couples stealing moments together despite the risks, their feelings strong enough to overcome fear. You see it in the friendships that form, servants who protect each other and share what little they have. Love, or something like it, persists even in a system designed to prevent it. You yourself might experience these feelings. A glance from someone that makes your heart quicken. A conversation that leaves you smiling for hours. The touch of a hand, brief and deniable, that lingers in your memory. Or perhaps you don't. Perhaps you're too tired, too focused on survival, too aware of the consequences to risk feeling anything. Either way is acceptable. Either way is simply another aspect of service, another thing you navigate as best you can, hoping for connection while knowing it might never come, or if it does, might never be allowed to flourish into anything lasting. And so you continue, sometimes alone, sometimes with tentative attachments, making your way through a system that values your labor but not your heart. The distinction between upper and lower servants is not subtle. It's a chasm as deep and unbridgeable as the one between servants and family, perhaps more so, because it exists within the same social class. You're all servants, all working in the same house, all subordinate to the family. But some servants are more subordinate than others, and those who've risen above the lowest ranks guard their status jealously. The upper servants occupy a different world, even though it's under the same roof. They have private rooms, small but their own, with a door that closes and locks. They eat separately, or at the head of the servants' table. They're served by lower servants, an irony not lost on anyone. They receive higher wages, better food, better clothing. They're addressed with titles and respect. Mr. Butler, Mrs. Housekeeper. They speak to the family directly, while you speak to them and they relay messages. It's a layer of insulation that marks their elevation. The butler and housekeeper are the monarchs of this realm. They hire and fire lower servants, often without consulting the family. They set schedules, assign tasks, and mete out punishments. Their word is law, and questioning them is as unthinkable as questioning the master himself. They maintain a formal distance from lower servants, never socializing, never displaying familiarity. You address them properly, bow or curtsy when they enter a room, and speak only when spoken to. The lady's maid and valet occupy a strange position. They're upper servants by virtue of their close attendance on the family, but they're not quite at the butler and housekeeper level. They eat with the upper servants, and are treated as equals in that context. but they answer to the mistress or master directly, which gives them an independent power base. They often become confidants, privy to family secrets, trusted in ways other servants never are. This proximity to power makes them simultaneously envied and resented. Upper servants dress differently. Their clothes are of better quality, sometimes handed down from the family, altered to fit. The butler might wear a proper suit, the housekeeper a fine dress. The lady's maid has access to her mistress's cast-offs, which means she owns gowns that would cost a year of a lower servant's wages. These clothing differences are visible markers of status, ensuring everyone knows at a glance where each person stands in the hierarchy. They also have perquisites, the extra benefits that supplement their wages. The butler controls leftover wine and candle ends, which he can sell to dealers for personal profit. The cook can sell bones and dripping fat. The lady's maid gets her mistress's cast-offs, which means she owns gowns that would cost a year of a lower servant's wages. These clothing differences are visible markers of status, ensuring everyone knows at a glance where each person stands in the hierarchy. They also have perquisites, the extra benefits that supplement their wages. The butler controls leftover wine and candle ends, which he can sell to dealers for personal profit. The cook can sell bones and dripping fat. The lady's maid gets the mistress's old dresses, shoes, accessories. These perks add substantially to their income and their standard of living. A lower servant has no such benefits. You get your wage, your uniform, your food and lodging, and nothing more. The division extends to leisure time. Upper servants have more control over their schedules. They might take tea in the housekeeper's room in the afternoon, a civilized break with better tea and perhaps biscuits. They might read in the evening, actual books from the household library that they're allowed to borrow. They might even receive guests, other upper servants from neighboring households, maintaining social connections. Lower servants have none of this. Your time off is minimal, controlled, and usually spent recovering from exhaustion. Upper servants develop airs, adopting mannerisms and speech patterns closer to the family than to other servants. The butler speaks with authority and precision, his accent carefully modified from whatever working-class origins he came from. The housekeeper moves with dignity, her posture perfect, her manner controlled. They've learned to mimic gentility, and this performance sets them apart from lower servants who have not had the time or opportunity to develop such refinements. There's resentment, of course. You work as hard as any upper servant, probably harder, because your tasks are more physically demanding. You're just as essential to the household's functioning. Yet you're paid a fraction of what they earn, given inferior accommodations, treated as inferior. You know they worked their way up, that most started where you are now, but that doesn't make the current disparity easier to accept. Sometimes you watch the butler enjoying his evening tea and feel a flash of anger at the unfairness of it all. But the system is designed this way. The hierarchy among servants mirrors the larger social hierarchy. It teaches acceptance of inequality as natural and necessary. If servants can be stratified into upper and lower, each accepting their position, then the broader stratification of society seems equally natural. You're meant to aspire to rise, to work towards becoming an upper servant, not to question why such distinctions exist at all. The upper servants themselves enforce this. They maintain distance deliberately, reminding you of your place when you become too familiar. The housekeeper, who once was a scullery maid like you, is now Mrs. Ellis, addressed formally, and she'll correct you sharply if you presume upon imagined shared history. She's not your friend or ally. She's your superior, and she needs you to remember that, because her position depends on these distinctions being maintained. Yet sometimes you see cracks in the facade. The butler who speaks gently to a young hall boy struggling with his duties, remembering his own early days. The housekeeper who slips an extra piece of bread to an underfed kitchen maid when no one's looking. The lady's maid who mends a housemaid's dress without being asked. These moments of humanity cross the divide briefly, acknowledging shared experience beneath the structural separation. You also notice that upper servants are prisoners of their status in ways you're not. They've invested years in reaching their positions. They've sacrificed other opportunities. They're often older, past the age when starting over is feasible. They depend on their positions absolutely, which makes them cautious, conservative, and protective of the system that elevated them. You have less to lose. If you're dismissed, you're young enough to find another position, start over, maybe even leave service entirely. They can't. Their investment is too great. So they enforce the rules strictly, maintaining the structure that secures their place. The divide creates complicated dynamics. Lower servants sometimes form tighter bonds because they're united in shared hardship. Upper servants are more isolated, elevated above one group, subordinate to another, belonging fully to neither. They might have authority, but not camaraderie. They might be respected, but not liked. It's a lonely position in its own way. You navigate this divide carefully. You show proper deference to upper servants while maintaining your own dignity among equals. You don't challenge the system openly, but you don't internalize the inequality as deserved. You understand it as structural, not personal. The housekeeper isn't superior to you because she's inherently better, but because the system says she is. This understanding doesn't change anything practically, but it changes how you think about yourself and your worth. Sometimes you imagine becoming an upper servant yourself, rising through the ranks over years, earning better wages, better conditions, respect. It's possible, you've seen it happen, but it requires decades of service, perfect behavior, fortunate timing. And even then, you'd still be a servant, just a better class of servant. The divide between servants and family would remain absolute. So you're not sure whether it's worth aspiring to. Maybe, maybe not. For now, you're where you are, and the upper servants are where they are, and the space between feels wider than the stairs that separate the floors. Skills, training, and rare advancement. You arrive in service knowing almost nothing of practical value. You can read, barely. You can count. You know how to behave respectfully, more or less. But the actual skills required for service must be learned on the job, often through harsh experience and constant correction. No one sits you down for lessons. You learn by doing, by failing, by watching others, by absorbing information through exhaustion and repetition. The most basic skill is physical endurance. You must learn to work for 16 or 17 hours without collapsing. Your body, initially soft and unused to such demands, gradually adapts. Your muscles strengthen. Your hands develop calluses. Your back learns to bend and lift without immediate protest. This physical transformation takes months, and during that time, you're in constant pain. But pain becomes normal, just another condition of existence, and eventually you stop noticing it unless it's acute. You learn to scrub properly. Floors must be cleaned on hands and knees. The brush working in small circles, the water changed frequently. Pots must be scoured until every trace of food is gone, even the burned bits stuck to the bottom. Windows must be washed with vinegar and water, then polished with newspaper until they're spotless and streak-free. Each task has a correct method, and deviation from that method results in correction. You make mistakes. You leave streaks on windows. You fail to get the burned bits off pots. You're shown again, sharply, how it's to be done, and you do it correctly the next time because the alternative is punishment. You learn to light fires properly, a skill more complicated than it appears. The kindling must be arranged just so, the coal placed carefully. Too much or too little air makes the difference between a fire that catches and one that smolders uselessly. You learn which fireplaces have good draws and which are temperamental. You learn to predict how long a fire will burn based on how you've laid it. You learn to do all this quickly because you have dozens of fires to prepare each morning and no time to waste. You learn to iron, a skill that initially seems impossible. The irons are heavy, heated on the stove, and maintaining the right temperature is crucial. Too hot and you scorch fabric. Too cool and the wrinkles remain. You learn to test temperature by spitting on the iron, the sizzle telling you what you need to know. You learn the different techniques for different fabrics. Linen requires firm pressure. Delicate muslins need a lighter touch. You learn to iron a gentleman's shirt until it looks like it was never worn, the collar crisp, the cuffs perfect. Your first attempts are disasters. You burn things, you fail to remove wrinkles. But gradually, your hands learn the weight and motion, and you produce results that don't embarrass the household. You learn to be fast without appearing rushed. Speed is essential because there's always more work than time. But looking hurried suggests incompetence or panic. You must move quickly but smoothly, efficiently but calmly. This contradiction takes practice. You learn to plan your movements, to minimize unnecessary steps, to carry multiple items at once, to think ahead so you're not constantly returning for forgotten things. If you're in the kitchen, you learn to cook, or at least to assist in cooking. You learn to prepare vegetables, the proper way to peel potatoes so you waste minimal flesh, how to chop onions without crying too much, how to clean fish or poultry. You learn to make basic sauces, to time things so multiple dishes finish simultaneously, to present food attractively. The cook teaches you, sometimes patiently, more often through criticism and correction. You burn things. You undersalt or oversalt. You present dishes that look unappetizing. But you improve, because improvement is mandatory. If you're a housemaid, you learn the specific requirements of each room. The library must be dusted without disturbing the books. The drawing room must be arranged precisely, every pillow at the right angle, every ornament in its designated position. The bedrooms require bed-making with hospital corners so tight a coin would bounce. You memorize the preferences of each family member. One likes the curtains open, another closed. One wants the fire built high, another prefers it low. You learn these details through trial and error, and you remember them because getting them wrong means doing them again. Upper servants possess specialized skills that take years to develop. The butler must understand wine, vintages, storage, serving temperatures. He must manage accounts, negotiate with suppliers, and train younger servants. The housekeeper must know household chemistry, the best methods for removing different stains, preserving foods, treating fabrics. She must keep detailed records, manage inventories, and run the household efficiently. The lady's maid must be an expert in hairdressing, able to create elaborate styles that last all day. She must sew with microscopic precision, able to repair or alter garments invisibly. These skills aren't taught in any school. They're learned through years of service, watching, practicing, refining. Some servants develop particular specialties that make them valuable. A housemaid becomes known for her ability to remove any stain. A kitchen maid masters pastry to the point where she's better than some cooks. A footman learns languages, making him useful when foreign guests visit. These special skills can lead to advancement, though they can also trap you in a particular role because you're too valuable to be moved. Literacy gives you advantages. If you can read and write well, you might be entrusted with recording tasks, writing letters, keeping accounts. This brings you closer to the housekeeper or butler, which offers opportunities to learn from them. If you're barely literate or illiterate, you're limited to manual labor indefinitely. Some servants teach themselves to read better during their rare free moments, practicing with newspapers or religious tracts, hoping to improve their prospects. Advancement through the ranks is possible but rare. You might start as a scullery maid at age 12, become a kitchen maid at 16, an undercook at 20, and perhaps, if you're fortunate and competent, a cook in your 30s. That's a 2-decade climb. Most don't make it. Most remain kitchen maids or lower their entire service lives. The pyramid narrows sharply at the top. There are many scullery maids and kitchen maids, fewer cooks, and only one position as cook in any household. The same applies to housemaids. You might advance from fourth housemaid to third to second to head housemaid over many years. But becoming a housekeeper requires not just skill, but opportunity. The current housekeeper must leave, either through retirement, death, or taking a position elsewhere. These opportunities are unpredictable. You might work for decades and never have the chance. Or a position might open just when you're ready and you rise. Some servants leave one household for better positions in another. If you're a second housemaid here, you might find a position as head housemaid elsewhere. This requires excellent references, which means you must leave your current position on good terms. Burning bridges ends your service career. So you're careful, diplomatic, and patient, even when you're unhappy. The greatest advancement is leaving service entirely, marrying above your station, though that's rare, saving enough to open a shop, though on servants' wages that takes decades, inheriting something from family, though servants come from families with nothing to inherit. Some servants do escape. A scullery maid marries a tradesman and becomes a shopkeeper's wife. A footman leaves to work in a factory, where the hours are shorter and the wage better. These stories circulate among servants, offering hope, but they're exceptions, not rules. Most servants remain servants. They move between households, between positions, gradually aging in service. They develop skills, certainly, becoming more competent and efficient, but they don't advance in any meaningful sense. They're scullery maids at 12 and kitchen maids at 40, having gained experience but not status or security. And eventually, their bodies give out from the years of labor, and they face old age with minimal savings, no family to care for them, and no pension. Some are kept on in reduced roles if they've served a household loyally for decades. Others are let go and end up in workhouses or depending on charity. The training and skills developed over a lifetime of service have no value outside service, and service has no interest in servants who can no longer work at full capacity. So, you train because you must. You develop skills because work demands them. You become competent at things you never imagined doing. But you understand that this training leads nowhere but deeper into service, and service leads nowhere but to exhaustion and eventual disposal. It's not encouraging. But then, service was never meant to encourage. It was meant to function. And you function skillfully and continuously until you can't anymore. The human cost, health, sacrifice, and dignity. Your body begins to break down early. Not catastrophically, not all at once, but in accumulated small ways that compound over years. Your hands develop permanent cracks from constant exposure to cold water and harsh soap. The skin roughens, splits, bleeds occasionally. No amount of salve fully heals them, because the next day you're back in the same water, performing the same tasks. By your 20s, your hands look like they belong to someone 20 years older. Your back curves slightly from years of bending. Scrubbing floors, lifting coal scuttles, carrying water, making beds, all of it requires bending at angles the human spine wasn't designed to maintain for hours daily. The ache becomes chronic, a constant companion you stop mentioning because everyone has it, and complaining changes nothing. Sometimes the pain sharpens into something acute, a muscle spasm or caught nerve that makes you gasp and pause, but you push through because stopping isn't permitted. Your knees swell from kneeling on hard floors. Housemaids' knees, it's called, a condition so common it has a name. The joint becomes inflamed, painful, sometimes developing fluid buildup. You bind it with cloth and continue, because what else can you do? Surgery is not for servants. Medical care costs money you don't have. You work through the pain, limping slightly, until eventually you don't remember what your knees felt like when they didn't hurt. Your feet are a catalog of problems. blisters from ill-fitting boots, the same boots worn day after day until they conform to your feet through mutual deformation. Corns and calluses from standing on stone floors for 17 hours daily. Your arches fall, giving you flat feet that make every step uncomfortable. Your ankles swell by evening, the skin stretched tight, aching when you finally lie down. You soak them in cold water when you have the chance, which isn't often, and you wrap them in rags to provide cushioning that the boots don't. You develop a cough that never quite goes away. The smoke from coal fires, the dust from sweeping, the damp cold of the attic room in winter, all of it affects your lungs. You cough quietly, covering your mouth, trying not to draw attention, because coughing suggests illness, and illness suggests inability to work. Sometimes you cough hard enough that your ribs hurt. Sometimes you taste blood. You ignore it, because acknowledging it leads nowhere productive. Burns are common. Small ones from handling hot irons, hot pans, hot coals. Your forearms bear small scars, pale marks from ancient burns that healed badly. You barely notice new ones anymore. You run cold water over them if possible, wrap them in cloth, and continue. Infection is always a risk, but usually burns heal on their own, adding another mark to your collection. Cuts happen frequently. Kitchen knives, broken china, sharp edges on metal or glass. You bind them with scraps of fabric and hope they don't become infected. Sometimes they do, the wound going red and angry, pus forming, your hand or finger swelling. You might show it to the housekeeper, who might give you something from her medical kit, a salve or tincture. Or she might tell you to keep it clean and let it heal on its own. If it doesn't heal, if the infection spreads, you might eventually see a doctor. But that's rare and expensive, and you're expected to recover quickly and get back to work. Female servants face particular health challenges. Monthly cycles continue despite the work schedule. You're expected to manage them discreetly, without any accommodation. You bind yourself with rags that must be washed secretly and dried where no one will see them. You work through cramps that double you over, standing at the stove or scrubbing floors while your lower abdomen clenches in pain. You learn which days are worst and push harder to get tasks done before the pain peaks. Some women have it easier, some worse. The household doesn't care either way. Pregnancy, if it happens, is both physically grueling and socially catastrophic. Some married female servants work until they're visibly pregnant, then leave service to give birth and perhaps never return. Unmarried pregnant servants are dismissed immediately, facing childbirth without support or resources. The physical toll of pregnancy, combined with hard labor, results in miscarriages that no one discusses. A maid might bleed heavily one night, lose the pregnancy, and return to work the next day, pale and shaking, but silent, because speaking of it means acknowledging what happened, which means dismissal. Mental health deteriorates in ways Victorian society doesn't have language for. You're isolated, exhausted, powerless. Your days are controlled absolutely. Your future seems predetermined and bleak. Some servants develop what we'd now recognize as depression, a pervasive sadness and hopelessness that colors everything. You continue working because you must, moving through tasks mechanically, feeling nothing. Some develop anxiety, constantly worried about making mistakes, unable to sleep because your mind won't stop reviewing the day's potential errors. Some servants break mentally in more obvious ways. A housemaid might suddenly start crying and be unable to stop. A hallboy might become increasingly withdrawn until he barely speaks. A kitchen maid might have an outburst, screaming at the cook or throwing something, shocked by her own behavior. These breakdowns are handled harshly. You're given a day to recover, perhaps, then expected to resume normal behavior. If you can't, you're dismissed as unsuitable for service. Mental illness is seen as weakness or willful misbehavior, not as genuine illness requiring care. Alcoholism affects some servants, particularly those with access to the wine cellar or beer stores. It's a way to numb the constant pain, physical and emotional. Some butlers become dependent on the wine they're meant to be managing. Some servants drink on their days off and can't stop. The household dismisses servants who are visibly drunk or whose work suffers from drinking. There's no help, no treatment, just dismissal, and probably descent into worse circumstances. Suicide happens, though it's rarely discussed. A servant might hang herself in the attic. Another might walk into a river. A third might take poison from the cleaning supplies. These deaths are kept quiet when possible. The family doesn't want the scandal. The other servants don't want to think about it too closely because it forces them to confront their own despair. The life continues with minimal acknowledgement that someone chose to end theirs rather than continue in service. Yet, despite all this, most servants maintain their dignity. It's a quiet dignity, not the grand kind written about in novels, but real nonetheless. You show up each day and do your work competently. You maintain standards even when no one is watching. You help younger servants learn their tasks, passing on knowledge the way it was passed to you. You're honest, even when dishonesty would be easier and probably undetected. You maintain your humanity in a system designed to reduce you to a function. You find small ways to assert yourself. Taking an extra moment at the window to watch the sunset. Humming very quietly while you work, too soft for anyone to hear, but loud enough that you know you're doing it. Keeping a pressed flower in your Bible, a reminder of a rare day off spent in a meadow. These tiny acts of self-determination mean nothing to anyone else, but everything to you. They remind you that you're more than your labor. You develop a dark sense of humor shared with other servants. Jokes about the family's ridiculous demands, about the cook's temper, about your own exhaustion. Laughter that helps you endure, that releases tension, that creates brief moments of lightness. The humor is often bitter, tinged with resentment, but it's genuine and it helps. You form a philosophy, whether conscious or not. This is temporary. You won't be in service forever. Maybe you'll marry. Maybe you'll save enough to escape. Maybe you'll advance far enough that your life improves significantly. Maybe. The maybes keep you going. Without them, without some hope that this isn't permanent, you'd stop. So you cultivate hope, however small, however statistically unlikely. It's a survival mechanism, and it works, because you're still here, still functioning, still enduring. The cost is high. Your health, your youth, your potential, all spent in service of a system that gives minimal returns. But you pay it because the alternative, destitution and starvation, is worse. You make the calculation every day, weighing the misery of service against the misery of not service, and service wins. Barely, sometimes, but it wins. And so you continue, scarred, aching, exhausted, but still fundamentally yourself, still human, still possessed of dignity they can't quite strip away no matter how hard they try. That dignity, maintained against all odds, is perhaps the greatest achievement of service. Not the clean floors, or the pressed linens, or the polished silver, but the preservation of self in circumstances designed to erase it. The end comes slowly, then quickly. For decades, service seemed eternal, an unchanging feature of the social landscape. Grand houses needed servants. Servants needed employment. The system sustained itself through inertia and necessity. But by the late Victorian period, cracks begin to appear. Small at first, then widening until the entire structure starts to crumble. The first signs are subtle. Fewer young people entering service. A housemaid position that used to attract dozens of applicants now receives only a handful. Wages must be increased slightly to attract staff. Standards lower fractionally because perfect servants are becoming scarce. These changes are noted by employers with concern. The servant problem, they call it, discussing over dinner how difficult it's becoming to find good help. The servants themselves are changing. The ones entering service now are less deferential, more aware of alternatives. Education has spread. Elementary schooling is more common. Young people can read well, do arithmetic, understand the wider world. They see factory jobs advertised. They hear about shop work. They learn that other employment offers shorter hours, better conditions, and, crucially, more freedom. Service begins to look less like inevitable fate and more like an option, and not an appealing one. Technology plays a role. Gas lighting reduces the need for servants to maintain oil lamps and candles. Running water means less hauling buckets upstairs. Improved stoves are easier to manage. Sewing machines make clothing repair faster. Each innovation reduces the labor required to maintain a household. A family that once needed 10 servants can manage with 8, then 6. The reduction is gradual but consistent. Social attitudes shift. The late Victorian and Edwardian periods see growing discussions of workers' rights, fair wages, reasonable hours. These conversations don't initially include servants, who are still seen as different from factory workers or miners. But gradually, the ideas seep in. Why should servants work 17-hour days when factory workers are fighting for 8-hour days? Why should they have no guaranteed time off? The questions, once asked, are difficult to answer satisfactorily. The household budgets tighten. The British economy faces challenges. The landed gentry, once secure in their wealth, find their incomes under pressure. Maintaining a large staff becomes expensive. Some families reduce staff out of necessity. Others do so because younger generations don't care as much about status displays like large servant staffs. They'd rather spend money on travel, or modern conveniences, or investments, than on maintaining a butler and footmen for show. Then comes the First World War, and everything accelerates. Men leave for the front, including male servants. Footmen, grooms, hall boys, they enlist or are conscripted. Suddenly, households that relied on male servants are making do without them. Women servants also leave, drawn to munitions factories, where the work is grueling but the wages are better than service. And there's a patriotic element that makes it feel meaningful. They're contributing to the war effort directly, not just polishing silver. The war changes women profoundly. Those who work in factories experience independence, decent wages, camaraderie with other workers. They live in boarding houses, control their own time after work hours, and discover that life can exist beyond service. When the war ends, many refuse to return to service. They remember the freedom, the better conditions, the dignity of industrial work compared to the subordination of service. Service begins to be seen as demeaning, a relic of an outdated social system. Employers initially think this is temporary. They expect the war to end and servants to return to their proper places. But it doesn't happen. Young women choose shop work, office work, teaching, nursing, anything but service. The servant shortage becomes acute. Wages must increase significantly to attract any staff at all. Working conditions must improve. Hours must be reduced. Days off must be guaranteed. Service, forced to compete with other employment, becomes expensive and difficult to maintain. The grand houses begin to close. Some are converted to other uses, schools or hospitals. Others are simply abandoned, too expensive to maintain without cheap labor. The families move to smaller houses in cities, townhouses, or apartments that require minimal staff. A cook, perhaps, a maid, but not the elaborate household hierarchies of the past. The way of life that sustained service disappears as its context collapses. By the 1920s, service is in clear decline. The numbers tell the story. Where once over 1 million people worked in domestic service, now it's hundreds of thousands and falling. The hierarchies flatten. There are no more hall boys or elaborate footman systems. Even upper servants become harder to find. Butlers are increasingly rare. The position requiring skills and dedication fewer people are willing to develop for a dying profession. The culture shifts. Service becomes something old-fashioned, associated with the Victorian era now past. Modern young women want to be typists, teachers, nurses, shop girls. These professions offer not just better conditions, but also more respect. A typist is a worker, a professional. A servant is, well, a servant. The social stigma, always present, becomes insurmountable. Why would anyone choose to be a servant if any alternative exists? Some servants remain, by necessity or choice. Older servants who've spent their entire lives in service continue because they know nothing else and are too old to start over. They find positions in the smaller households that still maintain staff. They adapt to a changing world where they're increasingly anachronisms, representatives of a fading way of life. They might be treated better in some ways, valued for their experience and rarity, but they're still servants in a world that's moving beyond servitude. The war delivers the final blow. Again, labor shortages. Again, women discovering alternatives. But now the change is permanent. After 1945, domestic service in the Victorian sense essentially ends. A few grand estates maintain small staff, and wealthy people employ cleaners or cooks, but the live-in servant system, with its hierarchies and its all-consuming nature, is finished. The economic and social conditions that sustained it have evaporated. You, if you're still in service during this decline, witness it firsthand. The household that once employed 20 servants now employs 6, then 4, then 2. Then the house is sold. You must find a new position, which is harder now because fewer households are hiring. You're older. Your back aches constantly. Your hands are twisted with arthritis from decades of cold water and hard labor. You find a position eventually in a smaller household with less prestige, but maybe slightly better conditions. Or you don't, and you end up in a charity home for elderly servants, maintained by wealthy patrons who remember the old ways and feel some responsibility for servants who gave their lives to service. The Second World War delivers the final blow. Again, labor shortages. Again, women discovering alternatives. But now the change is permanent. After 1945, domestic service in the Victorian sense essentially ends. A few grand estates maintain small staff, and wealthy people employ cleaners or cooks, but the live-in servant system, with its hierarchies and its all-consuming nature, is finished. The economic and social conditions that sustained it have evaporated. You, if you're still in service during this decline, witness it firsthand. The household that once employed 20 servants now employs 6, then 4, then 2. Then the house is sold. You must find a new position, which is harder now because fewer households are hiring. You're older. Your back aches constantly. Your hands are twisted with arthritis from decades of cold water and hard labor. You find a position eventually in a smaller household with less prestige, but maybe slightly better conditions, or you don't, and you end up in a charity home for elderly servants, maintained by wealthy patrons who remember the old ways and feel some responsibility for servants who gave their lives to service. The world moves on. The young people who once would have been servants are factory workers, shop assistants, secretaries. They live in boarding houses or small flats. They have time off. They marry when they choose. They have options. Limited options, certainly. Working class life is never easy, but options nonetheless. They look back at service, at the system you lived through, with relief that they escaped it. And you, in your old age, reflect on your life. Decades spent in service. Your youth, your health, your possibilities, all consumed by the needs of households that have largely disappeared. You're not bitter exactly. Bitterness requires energy you no longer have. But you're aware of what you lost, of what you gave, and how little you received in return. A room to sleep in, food to eat, minimal wages that never accumulated into security. And now, at the end, a world that's moved on and barely remembers what service was. But you remember. You remember every moment, every task, every ache and humiliation and small triumph. You remember the other servants, the ones who became friends despite the hierarchy, the ones who died young from overwork or illness, the ones who escaped to better lives. You remember the families you served, most of whom never knew your name, never saw you as fully human, never considered what your life required. And you understand, in a way you couldn't when you were young and everything was immediate survival, that you were part of something large and now ended. A way of life that lasted centuries and is now vanishing. You're one of the last to remember what it meant to live in service, truly in service. Every hour controlled, every aspect of life subordinated to the household's needs. And when you die, whenever that comes, a piece of that history dies with you. The servants' stories aren't recorded in official histories. No monuments mark their lives. But they built and maintained the Victorian world as surely as any architect or industrialist. The grand houses, the elaborate society, the leisured classes all rested on a foundation of servants' labor. Without you, without the millions like you, that world couldn't have existed. And now it doesn't exist. And the new world has largely forgotten the cost of the old one. Service ends not with drama, but with fading. Positions disappear. Houses close. Servants scatter. The hierarchies dissolve. The rules become irrelevant. The system that seemed eternal proves temporary after all, swept away by war and social change and economic pressure. And you, a survivor of that system, watch it go with complex feelings. Relief that no one else will have to live as you did. Sadness that your sacrifice is being forgotten even before you're gone. And a strange pride that you endured it, that you maintained your humanity through years designed to erase it, that you survived with dignity intact, even everything else was taken. The Victorian servant's life, hidden in the shadows of grand houses, living in the margins of documented history, was nonetheless real and consequential. And though the world has moved on, though service is now history rather than present, the echoes remain. In the architecture of old houses with their servants' stairs and attic rooms, in the social structures that subtly favor some and burden others, in the understanding that comfort for some requires labor from others, and that labor should be valued, recognized, and treated with dignity. The servants are gone, but the lessons of their lives remain, if we're willing to remember them. The lights are dim now. The fire burns low. And you, listening to this story, can let it carry you into sleep. Let the images fade. The cold attic room, the endless stairs, the rough hands and aching back. Let them dissolve into the peace of knowing these hardships are past, that you're lying in comfort these servants never knew, that their struggles, though real, are now history. Sleep well. And if you found this calm tale helpful, like and subscribe. Until next time, when we'll explore another corner of the past, another forgotten life, another story that deserves to be remembered. Good night.